I recognize the member for Caroni Central.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I rise to make a contribution on this bill, the Non-Profit Organizations Bill 2019. As my political leader and leader of the opposition and my colleague from Oropouche East have both indicated, the good intentions of this bill cannot be ignored or denied. But there are serious problems with the bill. Many points of view were articulated on this side by the leader of the opposition, the member for Oropouche East. But I think two very telling points that they made was that, first of all, you had a situation here where for the objectives that were being sought, the good objectives that were being sought, to fight terrorism, anti-money laundering, basically corruption, the reach and the overreach were just too much. I think that is an important issue. And the second point that they were making is that basically in this overreach and dealing with the people's sector, so to speak, a sledgehammer was being used to slam down a mosquito. And I think those are legitimate objections to some of the elements of this bill. Now, non-profits are not organized for the business of making money. Generally, they are involved in charitable work or social work, but they can be involved in religion, education, science, research, environment, community, etc. But they are a source of social capital and an avenue for social capital development. This is an important part of society. And much research that has been done on the development of competitiveness, on the development of business, on the development of cohesion and competitive capacity in countries show that not just intellectual capital, but social capital is a critical factor in development. Now, organizations like these have to raise money. And to do this, whether you are a cricket club or a women's organization or a church, they can either get money from government or they can raise money from the private sector and from philanthropic individuals. So money is involved, although they do not make a profit. And once money is involved, the issue of trust becomes a key factor. For the donors who are donating money because they want their money to be well spent, and for communities that are served. And of course, if the government is giving money, the government wants accountability as well. So people in general want to know that the money is doing what it is supposed to do. So we acknowledge accountability as a key factor because donors want to know that the money is well spent. Accountability is good because it engenders trust. Government wants to know that its subventions are used for the purposes that are intended or at least articulated. For most organizations, it might be small money. For some, it might be larger money. And for others, significantly big money. It depends. And always the community wants to feel comfortable that money is being spent on the right things. So the issue is, how do you keep non-profits, as identified in this bill, honest and accountable and doing what they were established for? So regulation is not an unreasonable thing. We are not objecting to regulation. In some cases, they use public money, as the AG said. Okay? In other cases, they offer public or social services. They establish the government wants to establish standards. They want to hold the organizations to account. And they want to establish a framework for monitoring and evaluating what they are doing. The purpose of regulation, therefore, given the nature of the work that nonprofits do, is to protect the public, to protect charitable donors, to protect the state from deception and malpractice of any kind. And I suspect that the government, in bringing this bill, also wants to put safeguards to protect people from themselves, because that is often a problem in organizations and institutions of any kind, whether it's this, a business, a political organization, an NGO, anything. It might be worthwhile to note, though, that government and nonprofits rely on each other. Nonprofits provide services to citizens, while nonprofits rely on the government for funding in cases where they are state funded. This is true of the business sector too, and nonprofits and the relationship between the business and nonprofit sector. Business people can't go out and do charitable work every day. They have their work to do. But they would be prepared to support a nonprofit if they did it well and came back in accountable terms to them. And the government also wants to see performance of that kind. Nonprofits do not pay tax. They don't make a profit, as I said, and many of them are exempt from tax. Many nonprofits, Mr. Deputy Speaker, are NGOs and CBOs, and they are involved in or dedicated to a range of sectors. This is what is known as civil society organizations. They could be in cricket and football, they could be in music, they could be environment, they could be in education, they could be religious organizations involved in various charitable purposes. It could be anything. Now, can civil societies, nonprofits, CBOs, NGOs go wrong? Yes, they can. Directors can ignore the mandate and intent and do what they want, contrary to the aims and objects of the organization they represent. The member for San Fernando East spoke to some of those issues. Power can be abused as it can be abused anywhere and everywhere else. Civil societies organizations are not exempt from this. It happens. The membership can be ignored or have limited involvement, and the leaders can run amok. Funds meant for public purposes or charitable purposes can be diverted to personal use of individuals or a clique. Accountability issues can be totally ignored. People can be irresponsible. Transparency can be undermined. The institutional aspect can be weak. Leadership can be authoritarian and dictatorial. Yes, bad things can happen. But despite whatever flaws, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is civil society important? That is the important question. Well, it is. And I think the fact that you want to have a bill to regulate it acknowledges that it is. But there is a difference, I think, in development perspective that reveals a certain perspective from the government that we do not support. And I want to say that our perspective on development with regard to NGOs, CBOs, civil society organizations is very different. You see, we see these civil society organizations as a vital part of democracy. We see it as helping to strengthen democratic participation. We see it as helping to close the democratic deficit in countries. Civil society can be an essential feature of good governance. It doesn't have to be treated as if it were a criminal class. So when the issue of regulation emerges, one has to consider balance, the need for regulation, but also the need for an encouraging framework to allow them to develop. The challenge becomes, Mr. Deputy Speaker, how to balance good practice and the use of regulations to support good practice and avoid tipping the scale to overburden these organizations so much that you stymie growth and development and weaken advocacy and the democratic process. It should be remembered that many civil society organizations are based on volunteerism and advocacy for a cause. It flourishes in an environment in which enlightened self-interest can be pursued. The clash of enlightened self-interest in the society is essential for the growth and development of democracy and the democratic process, and the facilitation of give and take in the exchange of ideas and the building of consensus. I crave your indulgence, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to draw on an article I wrote many years ago in 1997, and which was published in the Nordic Journal of Latin American Caribbean Studies.
Silence.
And published in the Nordic Journal of Latin American and Caribbean Studies. In 1998, the title of the article was Globalization, Opening Spaces for Civic Engagement. Now, the focus of the article is on the role of people and the people's organizations in the development process as part of a sustainable approach to building a society. Now, this was 1997, Mr. Deputy Chairman, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And as you know, the talk today based on 2017 from the United Nations is about 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Now, in the article, I stress the importance of the stakeholder approach to the process of political participation. As all members will know, the Nordic countries are very strong on civil society engagement. They are very strong on stakeholder participation and consultation as practice. So what I had to say in 1997 made sense to the editors of the Nordic Journal focused on Latin America and the Caribbean. And this is some of what I said.
What you write about the buck?
Member, 1 second. Members, please. I would like to hear the discourse of the member for Caroni Central. Yes. So please, the crosstalk across the floor. Minister of Finance, Oropuchis, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Civic engagement has always been an important area of concern in the context of development. In most countries, there's a rich tradition of community action as a force for change in both urban and rural contexts. Today, civic engagement is described in a number of ways. Whether one describes the phenomenon as community building, civic institutions, social capital, citizens organization, non-government or civic engagement, the concern is really about two things: people's participation in the socio-economic and political process and the social infrastructure required to support the democratic decision-making process. One commentator writing on activities in the 1970s and 1980s has pointed out, and
Mr. Deputy Speaker, Standing Order 48.1, please.
This is an intellectual engagement.
it is simply because you have no ideas, you have no philosophical basis, and you are a backward political party taking the country in the back.
Okay, member for Caroni Central, I have not ruled as yet, but I'd like you to retract the statement you just made, please.
Sir,
Pardon?
I do.
Proceed. Tie in your point as quickly as possible, please.
Yes. And the commentator that I quote here is saying, it was really the government that set down the requirements for participation in the community development process. Tensions between the centers of power and the edges of society soon appeared. So that in this business of the emergence of the civil society organization, there was a direct tension between government at the center of the power and control process and organizations trying to find their space in order to assert their positions on particular issues. Now, I will simply read a few lines here more. If we are to take a sustainable development approach to Caribbean society, then the ordinary citizen and the organizations in which they assemble must play a pivotal role in the development process. Part of the role that such organizations and institutions must play involves embracing responsibility for the social, ecological, and economic sustainability of societies in which they live. And therefore, what we have to do is to not see civil society organizations as terror organizations, but organizations that sustain the social fabric and that sustain the political democratic process. And the philosophical position that they have is what influences a bill such as this. And I will explain again, and I ask for your protection, Mr. Deputy Speaker, because I know that they are going to stand up again or raise issues again. Because you see, in our manifesto of 2015, all right, we talk on page 17, we talk on page 17 of strengthening governance and institutional arrangements. The state provides the institutions and infrastructure that enable the economy and society to operate. Its ability to carry out...
Standing Order 48.1 again, please. Mention a clause at least.
The role of the Scammy Ramblin.
Overruled. Proceed.
To carry out these functions has an undeniably profound impact on the lives of citizens. And I close here as the voice of the people will continue to be heard as we adopt policies and programs guided by multi-stakeholder partnerships for national development. So we see civil society organizations as developmental partners, and in fact we say so in this document. We see them in the context of empowering the people. We see them in the context of the way you build and organize and manage your society. You have government, you have business, you have labor, you have civil society, all four working within a framework for national development on the basis of a vision. We also see them in terms of the development of volunteerism. And that is why we have views such as home-owning democracy, stakeholding democracy.
I cannot, as the drafter of this bill, find any relevance. I'm asking for your humble consideration.
What is the standing order?
48-1, you did? I apologize.
Member for Naparima, I didn't think the question was directed towards you. Please, please, please. Member for St. Anne's, please. Members, listen.
Follow my example, please. Follow my example, please.
Hey, you get baptized.
You all can't behave like me.
Okay, all right, members, listen. From now on, no crosstalk whatsoever. Okay, if that's how you all would like to be what you all would like me to subject you all to, no crosstalks. Member for Caroni Central, tie in your point and close off accordingly.
I'm tying in my points, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It is just the fact that I'm saying to them that they have no basis of philosophical organization of thought for bringing this legislation, which it is the thought process that I'm attacking in this legislation. I am saying that it is completely skewed, Mr. Deputy Speaker. So in this particular manifesto that I mentioned, we mentioned social capital, which is what I talked about, participatory democracy. And when you look at development today, and these things are instruments of development, all these civil society organizations, what does it involve? It involves institutions that focus on the economy. It involves the environment, of course. It involves building of people and community. It involves inclusion, participation, opportunity, equity, collaboration,
Deputy
cohesion.
Speaker, standing orders 55-1B and 48-1.
Please. What we say, no crosstalk.
All this has been covered.
Member for Naparima, stand and apologize to me clearly. Stand and apologize.
I apologize.
For what?
Member for St. Joseph, please. Member for Toko Sandy Grandi, please. Overruled, proceed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Thank you very much. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the whole approach here is one which should see civil society organization, which is what this bill is about, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is one in which civil societies organizations should be seen in the context of economic participation. It should be seen in the context of
which Oropouche East and which Separia have spent a copious amount of time on. Civil society participation, the need for that aspect, the third leg of the society kicking, the consultative aspect, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'm asking kindly, I've taken copious notes which I can share. This has been repeated. This is the 5th time it's being made from 3 different speakers. I ask for your ruling.
And as I ruled, AG, yes, it may be on the same particular topic, but his points are different from what was said earlier. So overruled, proceed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It has to do with political empowerment, the building of social capital, the building of community power and the strengthening of people empowerment, and it has to do with using these instruments, these organizations, to help people to learn and grow and develop so that you build that social capital accumulation in the society. Now, this bill, not the non-profit organization bill, is hostile, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to this kind of thinking, which is why they are getting up to oppose me. This is why they want me to shut up. This is why they want me not to speak. It is hostile to people and people's organizations. I wonder...
Mr. Deputy Speaker, Siparia, Oropouche East, hostile to Kucharan Trace, hostile, Mr. Deputy Speaker, all of this has
Mr.
been
Aegis,
said.
please sit down.
He is on a standing order. He has the right.
Yes.
You cannot get one like that, please. AG, proceed. What you make your point?
Mr. Deputy Speaker, with the greatest of respect to my learned colleague, whom I have respect for, lest he get upset, these points have been canvassed already from multiple angles, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I consider under the purview of Standing Order 55(1)B that we are bordering on tedious repetition, Mr. Deputy Speaker. We've taken this at 6 different angles, Mr. Deputy Speaker, but respectfully on the same point.
Okay, again, Caroni Central, you have now started the point. Let me hear what road you are going down, and I will then determine. Right, so proceed.
I was just saying, Mr. Deputy Chairman, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sorry, that the reason they are objecting so much is because the perspective that they have is very hostile to people's organizations. And you would not recognize the members sitting in the front bench here today from the founder of that party, Eric Williams, who talked about a people's sector and who talked about a people's charter, one in 1956 and one in 1970. And what this legislation is really a legislation to cripple an element of the people's sector. And they don't even have the self-knowledge of that. And even if they did, it wouldn't bother them because the track that they are on have nothing to do with ordinary people in this country. The network of civil organizations.
1B. This is exactly the submission from Oropouche East, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I have yet even hear a clause of the bill referred to. We are now 20 minutes into the presentation, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and we have urgent business to do. I'm asking for your ruling.
Again.
Right, so member, again, I would like you to close off this point and move on. Right, I've seen the road that you are going down, and again, it's bordering similar with regards to what have been said previously. So move on to your other point, please.
Sir, with all due respect, I'm not repeating anything here, you know.
I have ruled Caroni Central. I have ruled on this occasion.
The network of civil society organizations, whom the AG said he engaged, sent to them documents, a document that was done by a consultant and indicated concerns about a 2018 bill that they circulated. I don't need to go through this bill clause by clause, Mr. Deputy Speaker. The AG did that. The leader of the opposition went through significant clauses having to do with the distribution of power and the exercise of power under the jurisdiction and the conflict between certain bills in the country that have been passed by this parliament. My colleague from Oropouche East dealt with other matters having to do with power overreach in the bill and taking a sledgehammer to kill a mosquito. I don't need to go in the clauses for that. But the network of civil society organizations acknowledges that there is need for greater scrutiny and the need for an intervention. They recommended 4 actions. I won't read them here, but they recommended 4 actions that they feel might make it better, make the bill better, and make any kind of organizational strategy for scrutiny better. Now, the advocacy paper, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is not a response to the legislation.
Honourable Member, your 30 minutes has expired. You have an additional 15. You care to avail yourself?
I would like to.
Right, kindly proceed.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, will I get any time for the stoppages?
Kindly proceed.
The advocacy paper of the network is not a response to the legislation. This advocacy paper came out of an EU-sponsored consultancy to strengthen the civil society sector and to make it more accountable and responsive. So the AG is not the only one thinking about this. The government is not the only one thinking about this. The sector itself is thinking about it. But the civil society, through the network of NGOs, did submit comments on a 2018 draft. I don't think any of those comments that were submitted were taken into account, Mr. Deputy Speaker, in the preparation of this legislation. And I could ask the AG to get up. He likes to get up a lot. Ask him to stand up now and tell me whether, in fact, any of the issues were taken into account.
Yes, they will.
I think a careful examination of the bill and their submissions would show that that is not the truth.
In order 48-6.
Member, you care to rephrase or retract that statement, please?
No, I will say, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that there is a wide gap between what this bill contains and the submissions by the members of the civil society.
But the statement that you made, I would like you to retract it. The statement that you made, I would like you to withdraw it, and then you can make your new statement.
Well, if you want me to say that it retract that it is not the truth, I will do that, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Retract it, member for Caroni Central, and then you have the privilege to say whatever you want after.
I will retract it. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, I want to see how the AG will get up for this one. You know, we had a situation in which you had an Attorney General of this country having to answer a situation in which a building owned by him.
And in order 48-1.
Right. Remember, listen. I want total relevance with regards to the bill. Yes. I am not tolerating going down that road this afternoon.
Yes. Well, I am going to make it relevant. Because when the AG receives his rental, it is from public.
In order 48-1 and 48-6.
You are ridiculous. You all are ridiculous.
Okay, members, can I have my turn now? Member for Caroni Central, I am not allowing you to go down that road. Pronto. Proceed. Proceed.
The money that is paid is public money, yes. Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Hold on. Member, again, I have ruled. As the Speaker in the chair, I have ruled. If you are not willing to abide by my ruling, we will then take it to another level. But I am not allowing to go down that road. I don't even want to know whether, in terms of the relevance, in terms of how you're going to tie it in, I am not tolerating it. Proceed.
Okay, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Now, there is no problem with regulating the civil society sector. And civil society welcomes it. That is what I try to point out from the documents of the CBOs. And we in the opposition welcome the reality of regulating the sector. We know that. The question is what kind of regulation and what purpose is the intent of regulation, and how you arrive at the regulation framework is important. We need to understand, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the context and the emergence of NGOs, CBOs, and civil society organizations in our country, and their strengths and weaknesses.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, Standing Order 55-1B, the member himself has alluded to this no less than 5 times in his presentation. Siparia mentioned it. Oropouche East mentioned it. 55-1B, please.
Member, again, on this occasion, I'll have to uphold the standing order. I'd like you to move on to the other point, please. On this occasion, you have to move on.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'm summarizing some of the points that I made. I'm trying to bring my discussion to a close. I'm trying to make a point. I feel that the government is being unreasonable, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and you cannot uphold them in that. I mean, your job is to arbiter in a fair manner.
Member, not to go down that road. I am saying, right, in terms of the tedious repetition, right, in terms of the same point that you're going to come with, that you have started, I'm saying to move on to your other point. That's all I'm saying.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I am not sure that the interests of this non-profit organization bill is about organizations, or it's about civil society, or the development of people's organization. In fact, I'm sure it is not. It is about a uniform registration process. It is about establishing and maintaining a register. It is about rules and regulations for nonprofits. I find it surprising that the supervisor of the nonprofit organizations is the FIU. The banks in this country are supervised by the central bank. And if there is an issue, they flag it. All right? The insurance companies, they operate in the context of the inspector of banks and insurance companies in the central bank ordinance. We don't have any such thing for the credit unions. We don't have any such things for cooperatives. Why is it that we are treating this sector in the way that we're doing in the FIU? And Mr. Deputy Speaker, I am more convinced now than ever, given their own response to my approach of this as a development issue, which has miscarried in terms of the legislation, that there are nefarious purposes behind this bill. I believe that they want to single out.
On Standing Order 48-6, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
How could you say that?
Nefarious.
We are nefarious.
Member, again, find a different word, rephrase.
There are sinister purposes behind it.
6, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Naparima, I am not recognizing you at this time. Member for Caroni Central, again, a different word, a rephrase. Come on, I know you can do better than that.
He was a principal.
There is a
Silence
very big
on the
gap.
government side.
There is a very big gap between the stated intentions and the real intentions of this bill. I think that this bill could be abused and used for political victimization. I believe that this bill can be used and used for oppression. I also believe that this bill can be used to get information.
Member for Oropouche East, if you are sitting in that chair, I would not like to hear you, please. Okay. Sitting? Nice. Proceed.
So, I think that there are tendencies that create opportunities in this bill, given the FIU on the one hand, given the structure of the Minister of Legal Affairs in this particular bill, all the Attorney General referred, I think, to the Australian bill, the Australian situation. And all the references to Europe, to Australia, to Canada, to the United States, make it very clear that the way you treat with this sector is as a developmental sector. Secondly, that the way you treat with regulation is through an independent authority. And the way you deal with matters having to do with terrorism, etc., which is what they are trying to do in relation to the European Union requirements, is that you find a way of dealing with that as a particular situation, not as a general paintbrush. This bill basically assumes guilt of everyone involved in the NGO sector. My constituents, organizations in my constituency, are national organizations.
Remember, again, in terms of repetition, again, that was covered already by all speakers with regards to the various NGOs in their various areas. So again, another point.
Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Members on both sides, Laventille West and also Couva North, please.
Mr. Speaker, so if I mention the Red Cross or I mention that organization that is helping Venezuelan refugees.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, Standing Order 55(1)B.
Please. Again, member, in all fairness.
Are we going to mention every NGO?
Member for St. Joseph, in all fairness, member, you have been given on many occasions the opportunity to expound on whatever you have to say this afternoon. And please, when I now rule, I want you to abide by my ruling. Okay? You have been given numerous opportunities earlier. When I rule now, I would like you to abide by my ruling. Proceed, please.
But I have abided by your ruling. Every rule that you've made, I've lived by it. Okay? I am not accusing you, sir. I am talking about the government and their behavior, which I'm entitled to do. The situation that we are in now with this bill is, I would like to join the leader of the opposition and my colleague from Caroni Central in saying, from Oropouche, in asking to give consideration to the position of the NGO sector, who I know have written to the AG asking for time to engage on this bill and that they would like to contribute to the bill. And we on this side feel that there are many things wrong in this bill which need to be corrected, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And we feel that if the AG were to hold his hand, listen to the people,
we have 2 more minutes.
Make the adjustments that are necessary, we are going to have a better bill to regulate the sector. But you cannot come here, Mr. Deputy Speaker, as the AG has come, and simply taking the entire civil society sector, all 8,000 or 9,000 of them that he mentions, and come here with a broad brush and paint them as if they were a criminal class. I think that there's something wrong with that. I think where you need to really have the regulation is here. If the state is giving $200 million a year to the NGO sector, how is the state being held account for that? And how do we determine that who they are giving the money to are the right people in terms of what they say they want to do and what the government's policy is? Shouldn't we have accountability for that particular issue so that the state would answer how it is spending public money to give it to NGOs? Shouldn't we ask that? Isn't that an important question for $200 million? Shouldn't the state be more accountable as they are asking the NGOs to be accountable? I think that is very important. That's why I was raising the other matter of public money. Because, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I think this legislation is all skewed. I think the whole intent of it is not what is being said. And I think because of that, the draconian provisions cannot be allowed.
Well said. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, there have been a few serious interventions.
Members, I have ruled. I have ruled. Hold on, 1 second. 1 second. Both have your feet. Princess Tong, you have identified, also Lavantil West had identified, if that's the role that you want to play. The AG stood up soon after I made the ruling. So I recognize the AG.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, if I take away what I call the traditional play of the UNC, the opposition, which is first mantra, the bill is unconstitutional. Second one, need more time. Third one, create pandemonium and panic amongst simple people by confusion and misrepresentation of the law. And then lastly, by
Improper motives. What? He outlined three areas of improper motive that we are trying to create panic in the society. I am not doing that, sir.
Member for Naprima, what word you don't like? Panic? What word you don't
Word
like?
where he said that there are three motives every time we come up to create panic in the society and pandemonium in the society, or words to that effect.
Overruled.
Thank you.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, let me be very careful this afternoon to say I intend to criticize vigorously the arguments presented this afternoon. Not the personalities behind the arguments, but I intend to criticize vigorously the arguments presented this afternoon. I was saying that the arguments presented by Siparia, by Oropouche East, by Caroni Central involve the traditional ports of call for the opposition by way of argument. Firstly, that legislation that is brought is supposedly unconstitutional. Secondly, that the legislation is designed supposedly against the interests of personalities and people, simple folk in this country. Thirdly, I intend to criticize the fear-mongering that the arguments are no doubt intended to create. Now, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I want to say this. I watched the member for Siparia read from a speech, a prepared speech this afternoon. And I want to say that the honorable member, past Attorney General of this country, past Minister of Education of this country, past Prime Minister of this country, was deemed to be deserving of the award of Silk. As a person in public life, occupying the office of Prime Minister, the Prime Minister gifted herself the award of Silk. And as a leading member,
he is saying that the member for Siparia gifted herself the silk. That is wrong. That is erroneous.
Okay, listen. Naprima, you just have to make the point to me and I'll rule accordingly. Retract and... listen.
What?
AG, listen.
No.
Honorable AG, I would like you to retract that statement. Right?
and if you are ruling.
The same one that the member for Naprima spoke on with regards to the silk and so on. I'd like you to
I will retract.
yes.
Once
Once you have decided,
Yes, sir, I retract. Let me explain this.
Speaker, you should stand if you are ruling rather than sit down.
You know the speaker has to stand and rule. Of the argument raised by Caroni Central about propriety. I am saying as a matter of fact that the Prime Minister of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago is the only person under law who can grant the status of silk in this country. It's a fact.
The relevance to members, I am ruling. Have your seat. I can treat you all how you all are trying to treat me in this chair. Please, AG, the relevance, move on.
Relevance to what, sir? I will move on. Mr. Guide me.
Move on. Move on to a new topic, Mr. AG.
Yes, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I will move on. I will move on to the point of propriety in public life. I'm answering the submission of Caroni Central. May I do so, Mr. Deputy Speaker? Thank you. In answering the submission, as I'm entitled in my wrap-up to do, so I'm grounding my relevance to be careful to make sure that I don't offend any ruling or the rules of the Parliament by standing order. I am responding to the allegation of the need for this legislation to coincide with integrity in public life. And I am saying, as a matter of fact, in answer to the member for Caroni Central, he having raised it for a full 15 minutes, that the award of the status of silk in this country is only done constitutionally by the Prime Minister of by the Prime Minister You must rule.
EG. Let's move on to another point for me, please, now. I know you are learned enough to move to make another relevance towards that particular issue. I have ruled on it, so it's only fair that I do it that way.
Sure, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'll be guided. I move on. I understand I'm causing pain to my colleagues.
Central, okay.
I'm causing pain to my colleagues. I respect your ruling. I will move on. Do so, though, like so, when the truth is said. Move on. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the arguments offered, be they in hysteria, be they in a vein which can be interpreted to cause panic, and be they in terms of the submissions read by Siparia, because I was quite surprised that Siparia had to read her entire submission. The position in relation to this bill must now be answered. Let's start with the allegations by Siparia that this bill somehow requires a constitutional majority. Siparia was very clear in her submission to say she accepts that the bill is a simple majority bill, that the bill does not traverse any 3/5 rights contained in the Constitution pursuant to sections 4 and 5. And very importantly, the honourable member went on to say that there were anomalies in the bill which causes one to have concern about. If you don't understand English, Naparima can't help you. So, Madam Speaker, the honourable member for Siparia, in raising the issue of constitutionality, sought to ground her argument after having made a submission that the bill does not trip any 3/5 majority rights, sections 4 and 5 rights in the Constitution. The honourable member went on to make most astounding submissions in law. First one that stands out. The honourable member for Siparia said it was improper and a conflict of interest for the FIU to be the regulator as proposed by Clause 4. That is what the honourable member said. The honourable member, in making that legal submission, having gifted herself senior counsel as she properly did as Prime Minister,
Madam Speaker,
standing as a member of the
on a
inner
point of
bar.
order 48(1), the Attorney General keeps raising this issue about silk, and the Deputy Speaker ruled.
Attorney General, I believe the Deputy Speaker has indicated that you should take a different route. So
Yes, Madam
there's
Speaker.
continuity.
Yes.
Please abide by that.
Senior counsel, the member for Siparia, in making her legal submissions this afternoon, having received silk to become senior counsel in whatever fashion that happened, senior counsel made the submission that I withdraw.
A different way.
I withdraw.
But please.
Yes. It's
Okay.
a touchy subject, I understand.
Yeah.
I withdraw.
So let's continue.
Yes. I can. Yes.
1 minute, please, okay? Because even though I was not in the chamber, I am seeing a developing trend that when the presiding officer rules, members stand up and either contradict or add. That needs to be nipped in the bud now. Okay? And it applies to both sides. All right? Continue.
What time is full-time due to end?
Your original time is 7:05, and you have an additional 15 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'll make haste. Madam Speaker, I'm answering the submission of Siparia, which was, in my respectful view, a very poor submission on the law. It was scandalous in the sense of legal argument, not in terms of the pejorative sense attributed to a member. I am not speaking about that. The argument was frivolous and vexatious, and I will see how. The honourable member stood up to try to tell us that the FIU was in a conflict of interest as a regulator. The honourable member went on to say that there is no entity that is in that circumstance. But, Madam Speaker, I am shocked to see in black and white the Proceeds of Crime Act, Section 2, providing in the first schedule to the Proceeds of Crime Act the following listed businesses which are to be supervised by the Financial Intelligence Unit. 1, real estate agents. 2, motor vehicle sales, gaming houses, pool betting, national lotteries, online betting games, jewelers, private members clubs, attorneys at law, accountants or other persons performing functions of accountant or other independent legal profession, an art dealer, trust and company service provider. Madam Speaker, the Financial Intelligence Unit's powers are to be found in the Financial Intelligence Units Act, Chapter 7201. I go straight away to Section 8. Section 8 says, the functions and powers of the FIU. The FIU shall be responsible for collection, financial intelligence and information, the analysis, dissemination, exchange of financial intelligence, information among law enforcement, financial institutions, listed businesses, which I just read, and internationally, and shall exercise functions given to it under the Proceeds of Crime Act. The FIU shall receive suspicious transaction reports, activity reports, the functions assigned, etc., are as set out in the law. The Financial Intelligence Unit, birthed in 2009, was set up as an administrative version of that, number 1. It is not law enforcement, and it is not the third type, which is the hybrid type. It has stood as the law since 2009 with the functions described in 2008. Secondly, Madam Speaker.
Member for Naparima, if you want to make an interruption, you know how. If you cannot regulate yourself in here, I suggest you take a little walk, control yourself, and come back. Listen to me.
Are you suggesting I take it now?
I'm not suggesting anything to you. Okay, and we're not in a conversation. Either you understand what I'm saying or you suffer the penalty. Attorney General.
Sections 9, 10, 11, 12, onward, and 18 in particular, identify in chapter and verse the coercive, pseudo-investigative, reporting factions that the FIU exercises. So, Madam Speaker, to hear learned senior counsel, the Honourable Member for Siparia, make a submission that the FIU, in being the regulator under Clause 4, is in some unique circumstance never found in Trinidad and Tobago before, belies the title of research and diligence with respect to preparation. I am sure the Honourable Member herself is not guilty of that. Perhaps it was the speechwriter, because the Honourable Member read from copious notes prepared. So, Madam Speaker, perhaps it was wrong, but I'm correcting the record now. The investigative functions, the powers of dissemination of information, the collection of suspicious transactions, the analysis, the data, all of that happens in the FIU and has happened since the year 2009. More than that, they happened under the watch of the member for Siparia as Prime Minister of this country.
No, which letter?
Under umpteen amendments to the Financial Intelligence Unit Act. The Honourable Member did not seek to change the law, but today arrives to say that the FIU, by being a regulator for non-profit organizations, is acting in a capacity which is unlawful, to the point where the Honourable Member says that the opposition will challenge the law. I'd love to see that. But the honourable member says that this circumstance is now unusual. So let's go to what would be supervised by putting the regulator in clause 4. Madam Speaker, I've noticed a very feeble attempt. I find Oropuch is very entertaining in his contribution. He's made a few points which I will address, which I think are sensible areas to be addressed. But, Madam Speaker, if I take that aside to listen to Siparia say that there's an unconstitutionality in the FIU acting, and then to hear Caroni Central say that the minister being involved in the FIU pollutes the FIU, Madam Speaker, the FIU, Madam Speaker, is an autonomous entity from the Ministry of Finance, so categorized and rated by the Financial Action Task Force, so insulated that the FIU can't tell the Minister of Finance anything other than I want more money by way of appropriation cycles. But Madam Speaker, that is well known to my colleagues opposite. But Madam Speaker, when we get to the functionality of the regulator, the FIU, supervising non-profit organizations, let's look at what's involved. The scandal or the panic that one can walk away with from the arguments is as follows. Some small person raising money, a cake sale person, some other entity, a sole individual is going to be put out of this business. Madam Speaker, let me go to the law. The bill before us says a non-profit organization, this is in clause 3, means a body of persons, whether incorporated or unincorporated, which, and there are 3 subsections, A, B, and C. You must combine all of them. You must be established primarily for certain purposes, patriotic, religious, philanthropic, charitable, etc. And you must carry on business without pecuniary gain to its members, except as reasonable compensation. And you must restrict the use of any profits or other accretions to the promotion of its purpose. That clearly does not include the cake seller, the sports goods raiser, because they will never be registered as non-profit organizations because they are not making declarations of trust. And I would like to say that the contribution by San Fernando East today was scholarly and stellar. Because as early as 1601, under the Charitable Uses Act, it has been determined that the element of charitable purpose in 1601, take that law forward, now in non-profit organizations, that 3-pronged combination, that excludes the vast majority of entities. And for the honourable member for Caroni Central to say political parties are going to be included, please refer to page 5 of the bill, correct, together with page 4, and just read the English language.
But
Madam
would
Speaker.
the member give way?
No, I'm not. Read the English language, Madam Speaker, because...
Member for Caroni Central. Member for Caroni Central.
Madam Speaker, so the honourable member, in terms of the...
Member for Caroni Central, I'll give you an opportunity to retract that outburst. Okay, I'll give you an opportunity to do that.
You mean when I asked you if you heard?
On your legs.
You mean that?
I am giving you an opportunity to retract your outburst. Please do it. It's your option.
I retract, Madam Speaker.
Thank you very much. Attorney General.
So, Madam Speaker, the definition of non-profit organization is very clear. It is a 3-pronged combination. You can only enter that basket if you qualify under the 3 limbs. It excludes, therefore, the vast majority of purposes, and it does not include political enterprise.